Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and to help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we'll be joined by Texas Impact policy advocate Bobby Watson for a conversation about his travels this summer related to his work with Texas Impact's Ending Gun Violence team. We had previously scheduled this conversation, but I feel like it took on an increased significance this weekend after the assassination attempt of former President Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania. And y'all, I've been traveling a lot over the last few weeks, and I know the anxiety level in the country is high, and now it's getting even higher. And I was proud to see so many faith leaders offer reflections condemning political violence and calling us for peaceful conversations about important issues. Bishop Rueben Saenz, a United Methodist bishop in Texas, who's been a guest on this program in the past, offered these words as part of a longer reflection. Quote, "Today we denounce any form of political violence, regardless of the individuals involved or their political affiliations. Acts of violence only breed more violence and sow the seeds of further hatred and discord. Our faith compels us to reject such actions and to seek paths of understanding, dialogue, and nonviolent solutions to our differences. In times of political tension and disagreement, we must remember our shared humanity, the sacred worth and inherent dignity of every person. As God's people of peace, we engage in respectful and constructive conversations, seeking common ground and striving for justice and equality for all." Bishop Saenz writes, "I call upon all United Methodists, and I would add all people, to pray for healing and unity in our nation. Let us pray for the recovery of former President Trump, the well-being of his family, and those affected by this act of violence so they may find comfort, strength, and hope during this difficult time. In the face of violence, let us be agents that pursue the way of peace. Let us work tirelessly to build bridges, to resist all forms and forces of hate, and to promote understanding and compassion. Together, let us strive for a society where differences are respected, conflicts are resolved peacefully, and justice prevails. May God grant us the wisdom, courage, and grace to be instruments of peace and reconciliation in our troubled world." End quote. I am grateful for Bishop Saenz' words, but also feel a particular challenge as someone working in the intersection of faith and public policy. This is a moment for us to lead, to demonstrate and encourage full participation in democracy in a way that's both prophetic and respectful, that's focused on issues and community, and always working for the common good, which includes valuing all voices in our community. Now is the moment for people of faith to lead and model what it means to passionately advocate and lead in civic engagement in a way that respects the entire community and rejects violence and violent rhetoric. I believe we can do this, and I look forward to walking on this journey with you. So with that, here it is. I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Bobby Watson. Joining us for today's conversation is friend of the program and Texas Impact staff colleague Bobby Watson, who serves as a policy advocate for Texas Impact and has been on this program a number of times talking about his team related to ending gun violence. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be back.
It seems like we would usually do some witty banter or something here about, how life is and that kind of thing. But with all of the events over the course of the last week, I feel like we have to take a moment at the top for a serious topic. I feel like since we're talking about ending gun violence, we have to recognize that one of the most protected people in America was shot on live television last week. We are all certainly praying for President Trump and all of the other victims of the shooting in Pennsylvania last week. But as someone who works on ending gun violence, you saw that. I know it affected you. What reflections did you have?
Well, one reflection I had is that it is hard to work on this issue, but I also just don't feel surprised by the incidents because so much of this is we're aware of that gun violence is so constant and present, and that we've really created a situation that makes it so easy for events to turn deadly because we don't really have any ability to regulate in public spaces where firearms are, and our culture is so heated and we have so much political polarization. It just makes it so easy for events, public events, rallies, to turn violent. And with temperatures and people feeling so high, tension so high right now, and people feeling so frustrated, it feels kind of like a perfect storm for there to be political violence, which is scary and concerning, but also really emphasizes the fact that we do need to work on it, and we have to address our culture around gun ownership and what that means, and also look at our political polarization because it's not great where we're at.
And we talked about it on our staff meeting this week that this really is a moment for Texans of faith to speak to our communities, to speak to the broader culture. And that's certainly, the gun violence space is certainly one where we have something to say. And so I know you have folks who've been working on this issue over the course of the last year. Do you feel like they're motivated and ready to have these conversations?
Yeah, I think people are ready to have these conversations, and I think that there's starting to be more conversations in bipartisan spaces and more areas with people from on either end of the political spectrum, because gun violence isn't. It doesn't pick certain groups; it's hitting everyone. And while there's like historically a disproportionate amount of gun violence in Black communities, we also know mass shootings are hitting our schools where everyone's concerned, and even people who represent, hard defenders of the Second Amendment are on the political right, like former President Donald Trump, were experienced gun violence. So everyone's starting to get concerned, and I know that parents are starting to, on either end of the political spectrum, are starting to be more concerned and want to have those conversations. There are groups in Tennessee and Texas who are traditionally really anti any sort of gun regulation, now wanting to have these conversations because they're aware that gun violence is present everywhere. So I think there is a lot of appetite and momentum from the collective community to start having these conversations and looking at us and what we can do to make everyone safer.
It is hot outside. You've mentioned that. And summer is heating up. Everyone in Texas is feeling it right now. And you've talked about the notion that gun violence is highest during these hot summer months. Talk to us about what you're watching during this time of year, during the heat of summer.
Yeah, summer is a particular time in the gun violence realm for a number of reasons. One is because you mentioned the heat. We know that in the summer months that there is usually higher levels of gun violence. There's usually more mass shooting occurrences. There's usually higher urban violence. There's gun violence seems to happen a lot more in those times. And that's for a number of reasons. We know one is that because school is out, usually shooters tend to be younger males, and so there's less distractions, and also families are often all under one roof, and mass shootings particularly go after where there are more opportunities. So when people are under one roof, they're usually family events, and then also social events are happening, and there's drinking, and then the heat. Heat makes people get angry quicker. And when everyone has a pistol or something on them, that makes it easier for any type of argument or frustration to suddenly turn into something that's deadly. So those are kind of some of the factors that lead to these summer months being hotter. And we also know that in Texas, we're always thinking about shootings in the summer because May has 2 anniversaries of mass shootings, the Santa Fe mass shooting and the Uvalde shooting. So that's on our minds and present. And then June's National Gun Violence Awareness Month. So there's all these events, and we're trying to talk about it around those times. And then we're all just kind of bracing for July 4th because there's usually a number of deadly shootings that particular holiday. So just trying to deal with that kind of national awareness and prep and work towards those events. That's kind of what's going on during the summer months, and that's kind of been highlighted by our work because we've been to several events there to talk about that and what we can be doing to lower them in the summer and beyond.
Yeah, you've been everywhere over the last couple of weeks, it seems. I know many people in the policy realm are taking vacations and stuff in the summer, but you have been really, really busy. Been watching your travels. Talk to us about some of the events you've had a chance to attend. I'm particularly interested to hear about the event you went to in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yeah, so one thing that's been exciting about our project Vidas Robadas is that we're starting to get a lot of connections and make a lot of inroads with groups who are involved with community violence interruption. And so what that kind of is that these are groups who are part of communities who usually face disproportionately high levels of gun violence. They're often in Black and brown communities, and there are people who go and essentially squash beef or resolve issues before they turn violent. So we've been able to have conversations and learn from some of these groups and been to conferences with them. Like in June, towards the end, we went to the third annual Violence Prevention Conference in Harris County. That was put on by the Harris County Public Health Conference. And there we got to meet a ton of great groups that we are excited to work with, like Clergy for Safe Cities, which is a national organization where clergy works with violence interruption groups and others to create safe spaces in their neighborhoods and to have to prevent violence from happening and have a lot of success in that area. From meeting Clergy for Safe Cities, they then invited us to come actually to the U.S. Virgin Islands, which was a really interesting event and somewhere I had never been before. It was really good we went there. It was an event to talk about the faith community's role in violence prevention and to talk about bringing these sort of national resources to local groups. Because the Virgin Islands, as a U.S. territory, has some of the highest levels of gun violence in the country. And that's due to a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is from gun trafficking from states like Florida or Texas. So it's kind of looking at how gun violence is everywhere, but also Texas and other states with some of our legislation on gun laws allows more violence in other places. And sort of talking about our role here and what work we can do here that'll help places that aren't just Texas, and specifically the faith community's role within that space. So those were really good events that we're excited to be part of. And then I did one more event this last week. I was in Fort Worth. We went to a community conversation at New Mount Rose Missionary Baptist Church to talk about a number of shootings that happened in Fort Worth following July 4th. They experienced a lot of shootings. There were several deaths, and they always do around July 4th, like for reasons I was mentioning earlier. So that was a good event to kind of rally anyone and everyone in the area who is working on gun violence. And we were able to connect some of our other partners to work with some of the congregations there, which is exciting and good to have all of these people in this coalition growing to address gun violence from a really holistic perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times during that response that there's real interest in the role of the faith community. And I wonder what you're hearing about that. What do folks think the role of the faith community should be in ending gun violence?
Yeah, so I think there are several pieces that the faith community are really critical to. One is particularly in Black and Brown communities, faith community has been there as a support system through the trauma of these events. They are the ones who are grieving with families. They are the ones who are doing the funerals. So they're on the front lines experiencing that trauma and helping people process that and try and provide some safe spaces. And they often have strong ties to community violence interruption groups. So they are directly involved in the front lines of experiencing that. And so providing resources to them and helping them through that is something that is really critical. Then on the other end is culture. Faith community is so intrinsic to people's identity and their perception of what our culture is. And so having faith communities engage in these conversations about what our gun ownership culture looks like, what it should look like, what public safety means, is really, really important for all faith communities. So that, in communities that have maybe a more politically diverse membership, then they can talk about ways where we can find common ground on public safety, on being able to allow people to still feel secure in their ownership of firearms, but to also prevent unnecessary tragedies or work towards a more holistic goal in public health.
Are you finding that the congregations who are seeing the effects of gun violence in their community are then more likely to engage in the conversations or advocacy work it'll take to end gun violence?
Yeah. So congregations who are experiencing the brunt of gun violence, who their communities are the ones who are losing its people, they've been involved in this work for years. They have been doing it for a while. So that's one thing that's perhaps different for them than other groups is that there's been kind of a reawakening by groups who have not been experiencing gun violence, mainly due to mass shootings and concern for that. But these other groups who have been experiencing urban gun violence or perhaps large amounts of suicides, they've been involved for a while. So they've been having these conversations for a minute, and it's more so about an eagerness to finally have other people be interested in having these conversations with them, and trying to share resources among that and trying to get a really large collective involved and invested in collective safety. We're excited to be a part of that through our project Vidas Robotis to connect these congregations together.
Yeah, you mentioned Vidas Robotis, and for folks who want a much longer explanation of that, we had Bobby on several weeks ago talking about that project. But you are now coming up to almost the 1 year mark of that project. Talk to us some about that and how the project has evolved over the course of the last year.
Absolutely. So when we first started Vidas Robotis, the idea was kind of around making it a project about gun violence awareness. And that has turned out to be partially true, but it's not the whole purpose of Vidas Robotis. For some communities, it is about making them aware that gun violence is in their neighborhood. They may not be experiencing it, but their neighbors are. So having them be aware and then showing them ways in which to engage, that is still a critical piece that we've been doing. But now it's also been about highlighting work of people who've been doing gun violence prevention work for a while. And the main, most critical piece to me is what I just mentioned earlier, as about connecting people. It's become a sort of rallying flag because it is such a powerful display that everyone feels and understands whether or not they've loved someone. Everyone has the anxiety of losing somebody because of our political situation right now. So it's been really, really powerful in being a bridge builder and connecting piece and a flag for people to rally around and put these disparate pieces of gun violence prevention work together. That just makes our work in that space so much more powerful and effective when we're all working together.
Love that. Bobby, you have been doing incredible work over the course of the last few weeks, over the course of the last year. We're certainly all grateful for you. But there are opportunities, there are opportunities for people to join in that work. What's your homework? What's your call to action today?
Join our team. I say it every time I'm on here, but we have our Ending Gun Violence Issue team, and please engage with us there. We don't just talk about what's going on statewide, but these groups also they really focus on what's going on locally. And so we're still connecting and figuring out little pieces, but the best way to get involved and to figure out what we're doing is to get on that team. And also, if you have a congregation or work with a university or any other location that wants to host a Vidas Robotis installation, let me know. My email is on our website and all the places, and it's bobby@texasimpact.org. Just hit us up there, and we'll get you an installation to your location so you can be involved in gun violence prevention work.
That was a really enthusiastic pitch. I loved that. That was perfect. Friends, join the team. You get to hang out with Bobby. You get to hang out with a bunch of really great people throughout the state who are doing some incredible work. Bobby, thanks again for all you do, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was a heavy topic for this week, but I appreciate Bobby taking the time, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I also hope you'll check out the Ending Gun Violence Issue team at texasimpact.org. I know Bobby plugged that enthusiastically. While you're there, Texas Impact has a ton of resources for you to check out. I plugged the importance of civic engagement in the open, so make sure to check out all the tools and resources on the Texas Faith Votes pages and start making a plan for how you'll use them in your congregation and community as we move throughout this important election year. Since you'll be poking around on the website, I hope you'll also take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can reach me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnan, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.